Welcome to this video on one of the most important events in world history, the French Revolution. In this video, we're diving into the dramatic story of how the French people rose up against their king, brought down the monarchy, and changed the course of history forever. In the late 18th century, France was an absolute monarchy ruled by King Louis XVI and his wife Maria Antoinette, with a highly unequal and hierarchical society structured around three estates. The first estate consisted of the clergy, who enjoyed privileges and paid minimal taxes. The second estate was the nobility, wealthy landowners exempt from most taxes. Meanwhile, the third estate, comprising 97% of the population, included peasants, urban workers, and the bourgeoisie, middle class. These commoners bore the brunt of heavy taxation and suffered from poverty, rising bread prices, and unemployment. By 1789, France was in deep financial crisis due to mismanagement, royal extravagance, and expensive wars, including involvement in the American Revolution. The government was heavily in debt, and attempts to reform the tax system were blocked by the privileged First and Second Estates. On top of this, the spread of Enlightenment ideas, advocating for equality, liberty, and popular sovereignty, began to inspire calls for radical social and political reform. Facing bankruptcy, King Louis XVI summoned the Estates General in May 1789, the first such meeting since 1614. This assembly included representatives from all three estates. However, voting procedures created conflict. Each estate had only one vote, allowing the privileged First and Second Estates to dominate decisions, despite the Third Estate representing the vast majority of the population. Frustrated by this imbalance of power, the Third Estate demanded more political influence, advocating for votes to be counted by head, not by estate. When their demands were ignored, the representatives of the Third Estate broke away and proclaimed themselves the National Assembly, asserting their right to represent the will of the French people. The National Assembly's defiance culminated in the tennis court oath on June 20th, 1789. After being locked out of their usual meeting place by royal officials, the delegates of the Third Estate convened in an indoor tennis court nearby. There, they swore not to disband until they had created a new constitution for France. This act symbolized a major shift in power, as the National Assembly asserted its authority over the king's traditional powers. The oath became a key moment of unity for the revolutionary movement, showing the determination of the Third Estate to reshape French politics. As the political crisis deepened, fears of a royal crackdown on the National Assembly grew. Paris was on edge, with rumors spreading that King Louis XVI was gathering troops to suppress the assembly and crush the revolution. In response, Parisians began to arm themselves. On July 14, 1789, a large crowd gathered outside the Bastille, a fortress and prison that was seen as a symbol of the monarchy's oppressive rule. Though the Bastille held only a few prisoners, its arsenal was a major target, as the revolutionaries needed weapons and gunpowder to defend themselves. The storming of the Bastille was an intense, violent confrontation. Initially, the crowd demanded the release of the prisoners and access to the weapons, but negotiations broke down. The mob, determined and growing in size, attacked the fortress. After several hours of fighting, the prison governor, Bernard-René de Launay, surrendered. The crowd dragged him out and brutally killed him, placing his severed head on a pike as they paraded through the streets of Paris. The fall of the Bastille had immense symbolic and practical significance. Symbolically, it represented the destruction of the king's power to rule by force and a direct assault on the Ancien regime. The event demonstrated the power of the people in the streets, showing that they could and would take radical action to achieve their goals. The attack also energized revolutionary movements across France, sparking similar uprisings in the countryside, where peasants began to attack noble estates in what became known as the Great Fear. In August 1789, the National Assembly adopted the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, a landmark document inspired by Enlightenment ideals and the American Revolution. This declaration, influenced by Enlightenment thinkers like Rousseau and Montesquieu, outlined fundamental human rights, including freedom, equality, and popular sovereignty, stating that all men are born and remain free and equal in rights. It guaranteed civil liberties such as freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the right to property. And it established the concept of popular sovereignty, meaning that political power resides with the people rather than the monarchy. However, King Louis XVI was increasingly resistant to these changes. In June 1791, he and Marie Antoinette attempted to flee France in the flight to Varennes, hoping to rally foreign support to restore the monarchy. They were caught and brought back to Paris, which caused widespread distrust of the king. His attempted escape damaged his reputation and pushed the revolution closer to abolishing the monarchy, setting the stage for the proclamation of the French Republic in 1792. Economic hardship and political instability continued to plague the country in 1789, especially as food shortages and high bread prices worsened. On October 5, 1789, thousands of women, many of them market workers from Paris, organized a march to the royal palace at Versailles. These women, frustrated by the lack of food and desperate for change, demanded that the king address the severe bread shortages. The Women's March was a significant moment, not just because it forced King Louis XVI to return to Paris, making him more accountable to the revolutionary government, but also because it highlighted the active role women played in pushing forward the revolution. The marchers' success in compelling the royal family to leave Versailles underlined the shifting power dynamics in favor of the people. By 1792, the revolution had radicalized significantly. The monarchy had lost much of its authority, and the country was at war with several European powers, including Austria and Prussia, which feared the spread of revolutionary ideas. On August 10, 1792, revolutionaries stormed the Tuileries Palace, leading to the arrest of King Louis XVI and the suspension of the monarchy. On September 21, 1792, the National Convention, France's new legislative body, formally abolished the monarchy and declared France a republic. This was a momentous step, as it marked the end of centuries of royal rule in France and paved the way for the establishment of a government based on the principles of popular sovereignty and equality. After the monarchy was abolished, King Louis XVI was put on trial for treason. Evidence showed that Louis had conspired with foreign powers to crush the revolution. The trial was highly divisive, but in January 1793, the National Convention voted to execute the king. On January 21, 1793, Louis XVI was executed by guillotine in the Place de la Révolution in Paris. The king's execution was a pivotal moment in the revolution, as it symbolized the complete rejection of the old order and sent shockwaves across Europe. Many European monarchies, horrified by the regicide, formed coalitions against revolutionary France. The event also radicalized the internal political climate, contributing to the rise of extremism within the revolutionary government. Following the king's execution, France plunged into a period of extreme political violence known as the Reign of Terror. Led by the Committee of Public Safety, particularly Maximilien Robespierre, the government sought to defend the revolution from internal and external threats. Thousands of perceived enemies of the revolution, including aristocrats, priests, and even fellow revolutionaries, were arrested and executed by guillotine. The Reign of Terror, lasting from mid-1793 to mid-1794, was marked by a culture of fear, as the government used increasingly authoritarian measures to suppress dissent. Though it was justified as necessary to protect the revolution, it led to widespread disillusionment, and many began to question the extremes to which the revolutionary leaders were going. By mid-1794, opposition to Robespierre's authoritarian rule grew within the National Convention. Many feared that Robespierre's purges were out of control, and that no one was safe from accusations of counter-revolutionary activity. On July 27, 1794, 9 Thermidor in the revolutionary calendar, Robespierre was arrested. He was executed the next day, marking the end of the Reign of Terror. This event, known as the Thermidorian reaction, shifted the revolution away from its most radical phase. The Committee of Public Safety lost much of its power, and the government became more moderate, though France remained unstable. After the fall of Robespierre, the revolutionary government, known as the Directory, took control. However, the Directory was plagued by corruption, inefficiency, and continued economic struggles. It faced opposition from both royalists and radical revolutionaries, and it struggled to maintain order. Amidst this instability, Napoleon Bonaparte, a brilliant military leader, rose to prominence. In November 1799, Napoleon staged a coup d'état, overthrowing the Directory and establishing the consulate, with himself as first consul. This marked the effective end of the revolution and the beginning of Napoleon's rise to power. While Napoleon's rule brought stability to France, it also marked the end of the democratic aspirations of the revolution, as he would later crown himself emperor in 1804.